So when you go to a casino, where's your first stop? Is it the blackjack? Slot machines? Roulette? Ooh, roulette. That's a lot of fun. And if you'd like to play a character that's basically a never-ending wheel of roulette, then you're in luck. Because behind today's secret door, the Wild Magic Sorcerer test drive. So behind today's secret door, the Wild Magic Sorcerer test drive. This is Secret Door, a channel devoted to in-depth discussion about Dungeons and Dragons, and my name is Matt Morich. All right, I have started a Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the channel, your help would be greatly appreciated and much needed. And many thanks to Marcelo, Doug, and Jamie for your support. The link will be in the pinned comment and in the description. So a test drive is exactly what it sounds like. It's your ability to see how a class will play, because it's really hard sometimes to get a real grip on how the class will play versus what you're reading from the books for yourself or what you're seeing in a build. Playing it can be a little bit different. So a test drive is a little bit buildish and it's a little bit guide-ish because I'm going to be giving you what I consider to be optimal choices along the way. But I'm going to take you level by level, in this case from levels 1 to 10. And I'll touch on role-playing just a smidge, and then we'll get right into the mechanics of it. So let me make a little quick confession here. This test drive has me nervous. And it has me nervous because it's wild magic. The very nature of the class means that the things that I'm so accustomed to doing and relying on mathematical averages and, just my sense of what is optimal and making this choice or that choice, a lot of that, based on the main class feature of this class, is just random. It's roulette. Either you're going to get lucky or you won't get lucky. And I have broken down and tried to manage the table a little bit better for you so that you get a perspective of what you can expect. But even then, it's still going to be random. So it just has me a little bit nervous because I'm not used to dealing with things. I mean, the wild magic is unique. There is no other class like this in the game. And for those reasons, this is likely to be a bit quicker because I'm just going to be able to talk about, broad stroke ideas. I'm not going to get into a lot. This is probably going to be the most guide-ish. I'm going to give you ideas of what you should pick for feats or metamagics, but they don't really matter in the terms of the test drive. And I'll certainly have some concrete advice of how I would approach the class, but it's going to be, that's guide-ish, right? So it's going to be a bit more guide-ish than build-ish. So as far as role-playing goes, I don't have a lot to say here because sorcerers are maybe one of the easiest classes in the entire game to figure out how you're going to incorporate your ideas into that class for what your character concept is because you were born with it. It doesn't get a whole lot easier than that. Now you can make that complicated. You can create complications for that if you want to, but that's really up to you personally. I don't think that the class screams out to do such a thing. Now, from a roleplay standpoint, let me just point out something that may be relevant or not, but wizards are great characters. They're really powerful. They're wonderful characters and all that. And all that being said, from a roleplay standpoint, I would much rather play a sorcerer any day of the week because it really allows me to define everything as I want to. And as a player, I really like that. I also love the appeal of being born with it, or however you're going to define it. Maybe something happened early in your life, or maybe it just happened to you. That is the one thing I guess explore here with you with the sorcerer is just because you were born with it doesn't mean you've had it your whole life. You could very well argue that this just happened. I believe I made this point with the Aberrant Mind, and it applies to all sorcerers, but it really can work for you here with Wild Magic. If it just happened, like meaning you just discovered the power, I don't know, yesterday, last week, a month ago, however long, I mean, it could be that recent that you just got this set of powers. And that could really explain why you are wild magic versus another kind of sorcerer, because you really don't have a grip on it yet. It just happened. You haven't had this and had the opportunity to train all your life or all your childhood. You just got it and it came out of the blue, and everybody else's guess is as good as yours. If I were to play a Wild Magic Sorcerer, that is probably the path that I would go with it. It's fun. It's very charismatic. And it has a lot of opportunities for complications and for fun, for humor, for lightness. It's very easy to get caught, at least for me, I should speak for myself here. It's very easy to get caught up in grim or dark ideas for characters, especially magic users. But this class in particular just really begs for the light touch. So if I had any advice to give for role-playing, I would say think about those two ideas, keeping it light and keeping it maybe the idea that it just happened very, very recently. How recently, of course, is completely up to you. So now getting into the mechanics of things, I am going to suggest that you take the human lineage. I'm not worried about backgrounds here. I'm going to list 4 feats, and you could interchange them however you choose. I'm going to list off the reasons why you would want each one of these. Obviously, you're only going to get 2. The first, and I'm going to offer them first in packages. So the first package would be the one that any kind of full caster is going to want to consider, and that is Alert and Magic Initiate to get Find Familiar. There are 2 spells that the sorcerer really wishes they had, and that's Find Familiar and Wall of Force. Find Familiar is, of course, I don't need to go into all that, but that combination with Alert, because you can trade via Alert, you can trade your initiative with another party member, then the familiar is kind of giving you a pseudo advantage every time you're rolling initiative, because the familiar is rolling their own initiative. So you could swap with the familiar in that case. And that's very, very powerful. And obviously for a full caster, going first is really desirable. In your case, it's probably even a little bit more necessary, because after you cast a spell, very often, as we'll see, you're going to have a wild magic effect that could affect the battlefield. And so you may not want that going off when other party members have already committed spatially on the battlefield. So in that sense, it may almost be a cost of doing business as a wild magic sorcerer. So I'll offer you the second package, and remember that I'm not saying take this or this. These are the reasons why I would pair them, but you can decide for yourself. A lot of this video is going to be based on how you want to approach your character. There isn't really an optimal way for me to steer you when a lot of this is random. But the second package would be Lucky and Musician. Now, okay, so as a human, we're going to start with a heroic inspiration in the course of the day. After every long rest, you get a heroic inspiration. That does minimize the need for musician, and the only reason you take musician is if you can find a way to be able to get that heroic inspiration to yourself after a short rest. Is it worth taking the feat for basically, if I'm assuming 3 combats a day and 1 short rest in a day, you would be netting 1? I mean, you'd be benefiting the rest of the party, and that's great. But you yourself would only be benefiting by 1 heroic inspiration. Does that make it worth it? it could, because we're wanting heroic inspiration this badly, because it's the only thing that you have that will allow you to alter a wild magic table roll. Now, there's not a ton of bad results on that table, but there are bad results. And if you want to avoid them, heroic inspiration is your only way out. We don't need this really for concentration as much because the sorcerer has constitution saves. I should say it's proficient in constitution saves. You want the heroic inspiration not for constitution saves, you want it for the wild magic table rolls. This may mean that you're sitting there never using it, which could be bad. But if you feel like a short rest is coming and you have had no reason to use it for wild magic, but another reason comes up to use it, I think by all means go ahead and use it. Lucky is there more thematically, I think, for the sense of the character's bending probability, that kind of thing. It's obviously also going to be useful just to have advantage, but you are a character that's going to be able to get advantage on demand pretty often. So because musician reads that it gives it to allies and doesn't specify that can include you, the way, say, inspiring leader does specifically say, this can include you. My reading on that is that musician cannot affect you personally. You can't give yourself heroic inspiration via the feat. But what you can do, definitely by the rules. Now, the individual DMs may rule differently on that, but if your DM rules as I would, then there's still a way for you to do this with musician, and that is to give it to a character or a party member that already has a heroic inspiration, and they give it back to you. Now, this is where musician and find familiar as a pair could go well together, because you could give a heroic inspiration to your familiar and simply never have the familiar use it. It's sitting around with that heroic inspiration, and then when you give it to them again, they give it back to you. You would have your own little reservoir there of heroic inspiration to be able to bounce it to. I think because the sorcerer already has proficiency in constitution saves for concentration, I think the more powerful option is to go with the standard alert and find familiar. It's a very powerful combo, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But these two other feats are things to consider. But I am going to be referring to heroic inspiration probably throughout in terms of when I talk about Wild Magic Table, because you as a human would already have one, whether you take the musician feat or not. And remember, of course, with heroic inspiration, that isn't the sole source of heroic inspiration. You can be getting that through play, and probably should be getting it through play. You're a charisma character. And like I said, keep it light, keep it amusing, keep it funny. Chances are something will go your way with heroic inspiration. So for stats, I would take 15 charisma, put the +2 into that, and then take double 14s for dex and for con. Probably dump strength, but you could dump intelligence, one or the other. Wisdom at 12, and then 10 in whichever one you didn't dump. So at level 1, we of course get spell casting and we get innate sorcery. Now this is a new addition with the new player's handbook, innate sorcery. The sorcerer gets this, and it's fantastic. And of course, what they did with Wild Magic in general it went from being unplayable to pretty darn desirable. But with innate sorcery, you get 2 uses a day. It takes a bonus action to activate it. It lasts a minute. During that time, you get a +1 to your DC for your saves against your spells, and you can gain advantage on any attack rolls that you are making with sorcerer spells. That is amazing. And it's very thematic and very cool for the sorcerer that their spells just hit harder because they're just part of you. So I really like this. So if we were to compare this to the wizard's always going to outcast you. Well, theoretically, it's always going to outcast you, but it's also going to have a greater versatility of choice, and it's going to have that ability to deal with rituals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what the wizard's got going for it. What the sorcerer now has is potency, not just through metamagic. it's through innate sorcery. This is a very, very powerful ability. But I do want to point out here, if your mind starts jumping to saying, hey, a 1-level dip in Warlock and get Eldritch Blast, it is only for sorcerer spells. But as good as innate sorcery is, you only get 2 uses of it a day, right now anyway. So make sure that it's a worthy combat. I assume you'll have about 3 combats in a day, so 2 out of the 3 is very, very good. And that +1 DC, I don't want to make too much of it, but that's also like you got an ASI to your charisma, and it's always going to be floating on top of what, if you got magic items or whatever, it's always going to be an extra bonus. So there comes a point where that +1 is really going to be substantial. Now, you get 2 prepared spells at this point. So I'm going to, of course, suggest that you take sleep. My general rule of thumb here for the sorcerer, because your choices are limited, my general rule of thumb for the sorcerer, especially the Wild Magic Sorcerer, is to not pick a lane for whether you're a control wizard or a damage dealing wizard. I would say take a control spell and a damage spell and either a defense or utility spell at every possible level. Now, at certain points, you're going to be wanting to trade lower level spells out for the versatility in the higher level spells, and that's okay. We don't have to worry about that just yet. So I would take sleep as your combat spell. That's obviously going to be your control spell as well. And then I would take shield. Now, shield is going to be obviously shield is fantastic. It's also stronger than any damage spell that you really have on the table at this point. At the next level, we'll pick damage spells, but I would start with shield and sleep. Now, the only reason to not go with sleep, when we get to metamagics, if you were inclined to take Twinned, which is a great metamagic, if you were inclined to take Twinned, it may be worthwhile to take Tasha's over sleep because of your ability to hit different targets at different parts of the map. Sleep has a maximum of 4 targets that it can hit, and they all have to be within a 5-foot radius of a point. So the area of effect is tiny. It could be more desirable to have Tasha's if you were inclined to go with Twinned under metamagic. And Twinned is something I would recommend thinking about. But either one is very, very strong. I prefer sleep, but as I said, Tasha's strong choice. We're not going to worry about damage at all in this test drive. It's just not really something to really worry about if you're playing a full casting character of this kind. I would like to point out with a cantrip, Sorcerous Burst is probably the one you have to take, because if you do have innate sorcery going and on later rounds in a combat, you're looking to just cast a cantrip, it requires an attack roll. And so you're going to be able to take advantage of having advantage through innate sorcery. Now, Firebolt will do more damage. Sorcerous Burst gives you the advantage of choosing the damage type, which is great. It is only a D8 versus a D10 for Firebolt, but you get that, and then of course you get the extra fun effect of if you roll an 8 on that D8, then you roll again up to your proficiency bonus. Now, I should also point out that because you have advantage and it is an attack roll, that if you were to crit, then those D8s also. You're going to have even higher chances of rolling an 8. I mean, obviously not overwhelmingly high, but better chances because of the crit by itself. So it's a fun jackpotty kind of spell that also has legitimate reasons to take it over Firebolt, especially for you. And of course, there's the thematic of it with a Wild Magic Sorcerer. I don't think I could turn it down. Just to touch on other cantrips to consider as we move along throughout this. Obviously, Minor Illusion is very, very good. Prestidigitation is fun. Mage Hand is, of course, Mage Hand. And because you are human, you're probably going to want to take the light cantrip. Somebody else may be able to take that in the party, but I always like to have it for myself if I'm playing a human and I have that option. Okay, level 2, we get our 3rd spell slot. We get Font of Magic and Metamagic. Now, with Metamagic, there's only... it's not critical in the terms of the test drive of what metamagics you take. You get to choose 2. You're going to get 2 more at level 10. So when it comes to metamagic, I'm not going to make hard choices here. I'm going to suggest some things. Twind had some changes that I'm not particularly a fan of. Something like extend spell is something that you might want to consider. Now, actually, let me back up for one quick second. The Wild Magic Sorcerer has plenty of ways to spend sorcery points that don't involve using metamagic. Metamagic is not a big deal for you. But nevertheless, it's an option, and you should absolutely be looking at it because there's going to be times where you're going to want to use them. Extend spell is one of those things that it's going to double the duration of a spell that has a duration. And if that spell requires concentration, you get advantage on it. So if you were inclined to take Alert and Magic Initiate, this is your way of making sure that you can make your concentration save, because you're going to have proficiency in Constitution saves and having the option for a sorcery point of making that spell last twice as long and being able to really double down on making our concentration saves. Proficiency and advantage means you probably will never lose your concentration. But there are, the other 3 that I think are the big go-tos are, I kind of like Empowered Spell. I know that sounds really weird for me because I'm such a when it comes to spells, I'm really about control. But you have to play because of Wild Magic. You have to be open to the idea that your spells are going to be damaging this round because of how the Wild Magic table can turn out for you. That you want to be able to pounce on those kind of options when they happen. And so because your spell selection that I'm going to recommend wants to facilitate that, there's going to be times where you have that spell and it may be a desirable spell, but that's not what you roll on the Wild Magic table. Something to help facilitate it. Empowered Spell will help with the damage spells. So I like that choice. Quicken Spell, it's obviously good, but your bonus actions are also largely going to be a problem for you as it is. So I would hold Quicken in abeyance. And that brings us to something like Heightened Spell, and that would be great for your control spell. So if we went with the theme here, and you weren't going to take Extend Spell, then I would take Heightened and I would take Empowered for control and for damage. But you could easily argue that you don't need Heightened Spell, that Extend Spell will be for your control spells. But that's how I would approach my metamagics. So if that works for you, great. Do whatever works for you at the table. You can trade these in as you go along and as you level up. Now, with Font of Magic, it allows you to do things that I just love. I love these kind of mechanics where you can sack this to get that and then sack this to get that. So the Wild Magic Sorcerer has plenty of ways of doing this. So, but via Font of Magic, which is what we have right now at level 2, you can sacrifice a spell slot and gain that many sorcery points to the level of the slot, that many sorcery points. It also, by doing that, does not require an action, which is great. If you create a spell slot, that takes a bonus action, and at this level, it'll be 2 sorcery points to get a first level spell slot. At this point, at this level, that's probably the best use of your metamagic. Even though you do have 3 spell slots, that would allow you to have the ability to cast 4 in a day. That would mean that you are actually casting right with the wizard. So that's a really nice bonus to have. So if you were to compare with the wizard, you would say that you have the option. You can cast right with the wizard, or you can just cast in a stronger fashion. Now, you're going to cast in a stronger fashion via innate sorcery. But you could, of course, even make that even greater by amplifying your spells via metamagic. So either way, I wouldn't say that there's an advantage here. I would say that it's a question of what do you value more. So at level 3, we get quite a bit. We get level 2 spells, of course, which is fantastic. But of course, we get Wild Magic. Now, Wild Magic gives us 2 different features. It gives us Wild Magic Surge and Tides of Chaos. Wild Magic Surge, whenever you cast a leveled spell, then you roll a d20. If you roll a 20, you consult and roll on the Wild Magic table, which I will get to. Tides of Chaos, whenever you are going to make a d20 test roll, by spending a bonus action, you can choose to have advantage on that roll. If you do, you can only use this feature again until you have either completed a long rest or you have cast a sorcerer spell with a leveled spell slot. If that happens and you cast the leveled spell, then you consult the Wild Magic table, which essentially means that you are going to be able to always have one in the chamber. You're always going to have the ability to preload a Wild Magic Surge. So if we were to look at this, at the end of a combat, one of the easiest ways to pull this off is if you have a concentration save going and the combat is over, but your spell is still up and it's still running, have somebody slap you in the face or punch you in the arm or something that will require a concentration save, and then choose to have advantage on it, and that will reload your next Wild Magic Surge. Or it could be anything that would require a d20 test, or that you might be able to beg a d20 test out of your DM. It could be as stupid as trying to lift something really beyond your normal weight limit and requiring an athletics check or something to that effect. Anything you can concoct that will make a d20 test happen, you get advantage on it. Doesn't really matter. You're preloading. And I'm saying this way because you obviously want to save that bonus action. You don't want to have to do that in the first round of combat. You want your first bonus action available to be for innate sorcery. Now, having said all that, I do need to point out that your next spell that you cast will, by doing it this way, will invoke a Wild Magic Surge. So there's a certain level of danger there. If you had to cast something, say, out of combat for utility, Wild Magic Surge is coming. So there is a certain danger in doing this. But in general, I'm just saying this is how I would approach preloading Tides of Chaos to allow for the Wild Magic Surge. But it does come with certain precautions. Now, let's talk about the table. I had thought about maybe even doing a whole video just on the table. The problem is, I just don't find it to be all that worthwhile because I'm going to tell you some things that's going to help in some respects, but in the end, it's going to all turn out to be, it's a random result. You're rolling percentile dice. Every result has the same chance. So you have 25 possibilities. Each has a 4% chance of happening on the percentile dice. But of the results that are on that table, 6 of those outcomes, and remember that means 24% of the table, 6 of those outcomes are going to grant you either some form of defense or of healing. 3 of those, or 12%, is going to account for damage dealing. 2 of those results are going to create some kind of change in actions. 1 gives you straight up an extra action, which is fantastic. And the other means that your spells now only take bonus actions. That's something that needs to be considered here, is while it's only a 4% chance, with the kind of bonus action things that are required for playing a Wild Magic Sorcerer in general, that could either be good or bad. One of those results creates disadvantage on saving throws for your spells, which is obviously amazing and pretty much an encounter alterer. 3 other are control or debuff effects. So you have the 4% chance for disadvantage, and then 3 others that have control or debuff effects. So that's 12. And obviously there's still the disadvantage. There's one roll that requires you to roll on the table every round. So that is an interesting one. There's one where you cast a spell at random, and that spell could be a number of things ranging from fireball to polymorph on yourself, which isn't actually good, or it could be mirror image, et cetera, Misty Step, I believe. So, generally speaking, a really good result, but it has the chance of going badly for you with polymorph on yourself. So in total, there are 3 that are like further random effects: the spell, the first entry on the table, and I believe the last entry on the table. And there's 1 entry that is completely cosmetic, and then the rest are some form of negative. Now, that could sound like it's actually bad, but remember, there's only 25 outcomes, and what I just listed, including the simply cosmetic effect, that's 21 of those 25. So there's 4 bad outcomes, or a 16% chance. Now, 16%, it's one of those things that it doesn't sound like it's, that big of a deal, but it's statistically going to happen more than you think. And if you end up in 3 encounters in a day, and this happens 16% of the time, and you only roll on the Wild Magic table once on each of those encounters, and that's a big if, then you might get through the day without having to worry about encountering one of those negative results. But the chances is probably about 50-50. So that's why I say simply being human and having 1 heroic inspiration in the bank probably is good enough. But remember that Tides of Chaos, you could be doing that in combat. So if you preloaded 1 in the chamber for the Wild Magic table, and you come in and you cast your spell, you roll on the Wild Magic table, you get the result that you get, you could spend a bonus action in the next round to get advantage on an attack roll or whatever to preload another Wild Magic Surge. But I mean, theoretically, you could be doing the Tides of Chaos throughout every round of combat so that you're just Wild Magic Surging all the time. I can't say that I would recommend doing that, but there are times where I would. This is why I'm so nervous about this test drive, is that how do you give concrete advice about something that is completely random? Of course, I can't. All I can tell you is what is possible and what would be wise. My general feeling would be this, that in the course of 1 combat, I would not want to push my luck. If I liked things the way they were, don't invoke another Wild Magic Surge. Just don't. It's tempting. And if that's how you derive your fun, then that's okay. But remember that you're affecting your other party members too. And there is one of these results, albeit it's a 4% chance, that is giving everybody vulnerability to piercing damage within 30 feet of you, including you. So that could be disaster for the party in the wrong circumstance. Now, the chance that 4% is going to be rolled in a scenario where piercing damage is going to be overwhelming to the party at the same time is certainly, the chances of that are low. But, if everybody dies because you got greedy, I would say only roll extra Wild Magic Surges when you need to change the outcome of the fight. If you like the way things are going, don't get greedy. But that being said, you certainly could, and it could be a lot of fun. So I totally get it. But the main takeaway from all this is that because there are 6 outcomes that deal defense, and it's the highest of any one. And again, defense meaning outright defense or some form of healing. That's that's 1/4 of the table, roughly speaking. Just a touch less than 1/4 of the total outcomes. But that also means that 3/4 of the outcomes are, while it's the highest chance, it doesn't mean that it's probable. It's roulette. It's roulette. That's what Wild Magic is. And I'll tell you, I love roulette. So I could totally see myself playing this and having a gas. But you do need, just like with betting, you need to know your limits, know when to say enough is enough. Okay, now with spells, first we get our second level spells, and we get 6 preparations now, and we have access to web. So there's your control spell in the bank. You take web. For damage, Flaming Sphere. The two that I like best, and they're both concentration, is flame. The two that I like best are Flaming Sphere and possibly Dragon's Breath. That's one of those things that if you did have a familiar, it's a lot of fun to be able to throw that on your familiar and watch it turn into your owl turn into a little dragon running around the field and doing that. It means that familiar will get killed, and whether you want to be going into combat is the question. Now, this brings up a great moment to talk about this idea. Because casting spells can trigger a wild magic event, Shield, I recommended Shield. You could be forcing yourself into situations where you want to cast Shield. You could be literally daring the opponent to do something about it, and therefore cast Shield. So that as a reaction spell, you're able to give yourself the chance to roll a magic surge. Or if you already had one primed from doing a Tides of Chaos, if you had that primed and you cast Shield as a reaction, bingo, you could trigger the wild magic event. But regardless of Tides of Chaos, it's allowing that opportunity. It's going to happen because of the wild magic surge. So either you're rolling for the effect or you're priming for the effect. So you could look at Shield as a way of really just pouring the magic table into craziness, or you could be looking at it as a use only when necessary kind of a thing. It just depends on the situation. Bear in mind that at 6th level, we're going to get an ability that is going to be burning that reaction up quite a bit. So if you were inclined to want to do it, this is your chance to really do it. But the nice thing is that from here, levels 3, 4, and 5, your reactions can be largely accounted for 4 of them anyway, with Shield. Now, from a utility standpoint, you are spoiled for choice. You have Suggestion, you have Invisibility, you have Misty Step, you have Spider Climb. These are great spells. You need to pick. Playing a sorcerer is like a greatest hits album. You want to pick the best spells because that's what you got. I would say probably of those that I just named, Invisibility is pretty tough to beat, but it just depends on what your party composition is. If you have somebody else that can cast that and has it, Suggestion's awfully good. Spider Climb allows you to deal with a lot of circumnavigation of a lot of problems. I love Spider Climb. And Misty Step is, of course, Misty Step. But I would say of all those outcomes, as useful as Misty Step is, and it absolutely is, I would be hard-pressed to pick that because the impact that something like Invisibility or even Suggestion has is greater than Misty Step, even though Misty Step is obviously super great, super useful. Now at 4th level, we get our ASI, and we're going to take Inspiring Leader. I like Inspiring Leader for this. You could take Warcaster. I wouldn't recommend it. I would say take Inspiring Leader, getting your Charisma to 18, and being able to just really help everybody else out. And yourself, of course. And if you have a familiar, then you're going to be able to protect the familiar to some degree. At this level, that's 8 temporary hit points for 6 total characters. So it's a great, great feat. And if you did take it with Musician, then you're filling yet another role in the party, and that is that you're filling a support role as well as being a full caster. And at level 5, of course, we get our 3rd level spells. This is when full casters begin to just bloom and begin to really assert themselves in taking control of Dungeons and Dragons. And now for your spells, I'm just going to deal with those right off the bat because they're the glory here. And I need a damage spell and I need a control spell. What shall we take? Of course, we're going to take Fireball and we're going to take Hypnotic Pattern. No big surprise. Those are the two strongest of their type. Certainly at this level, for utility spells, obviously things like Counterspell, that's another one of these things that can be interesting because it's a reaction spell. The problem, which could trigger a Magic Surge, but the problem is that you want to be getting off the reaction spells. You may even want to, you're going to want to keep shield in case of an emergency, but come 6th level, your reactions are going to be accounted for with what you get on 6th level. And at 5th level, we get Sorcerous Restoration, which allows us to recover expended sorcery points, but no more than half of our total sorcerer level. And then we get 6th level, and we get Bend Luck. Wow. Okay. So, it's a reaction. When you see a creature, and it makes a d20 roll, after it makes the roll, you can choose to use Bend Luck. You use a reaction to do it. And when you do, you take a d4 and you roll that and you assign it as a bonus or a penalty to that roll. Now, there are only 2 downsides to this amazing ability. One is that it costs 1 sorcery point, which is a bargain. The other is that it's only another creature that you can see. So it doesn't affect you, which is a bummer. So shield is going to still be useful for you, but that reaction is going to take a lot of competition. It may be for your benefit that that it doesn't apply to you, because that would really, if my model holds of 3 encounters a day lasting 4 rounds each, then that's 12 rounds, which would be 12 reactions. That would consume 12 sorcery points, which I would highly recommend trying to do, either by sacking spells or what have you. But if you account for the 4 that may apply for shield, then you're down to 8. That's still all your sorcery points here at 6th level, plus digging into your sorceress restoration. But at 6th level, you're now at 3 3rd level spell slots, 3 2nd level slots, and 4 1st level slots. If I'm right about however many combats you're going to have in a day, and you're using one of your 3rd level spells for each of those, you might have a follow-up spell to use from 2nd level, and your reactions may be accounted for via shield with 1st level, which means you're kind of accounted for at this point. But growing forward from this point, from 7th level forward, you're going to have an excess of spells. And I would highly recommend sacking spells to fuel Bend Luck. Almost every single turn, there's going to be a moment where you could justify using Bend Luck. Somebody misses, you want them to hit. Somebody doesn't make their saving throw, you want them to save. Someone just got hit and you want them to miss and you apply it as a penalty, whatever. And at 7th level, we get our 4th level spells, which is fantastic. You only get the 1 slot, but we also get Sorcery Incarnate, which means that if you spend 2 sorcery points, you can get another use of innate sorcery, which is fantastic. And if it's active, then you can use 2 metamagics on that particular spell. So you are spoiled for choice as a Wild Magic Sorcerer and what to. I mean, all sorcerers get that, but because you have Bend Luck, between the competing uses of that, you can see now why I'm saying I would absolutely buy the 3rd use of innate sorcery. I would just budget that out of my sorcery points. You have 7 at 7th level. 2 of those should be going for innate sorcery. And then, I could be blowing the rest on Bend Luck very, very easily and just say goodbye to metamagic. I could easily play that way. Now, that being said, if there's a big thing, some of these metamagics don't cost very much, 1 sorcery point. If you can get a big boom out of that's more valuable than Bend Luck, then by all means do that. I'm not saying metamagic stinks in comparison to Bend Luck. I'm just saying you don't have to worry about metamagic all the time. you have some really, really useful sources for your sorcery points with bad luck. To the point that this character really should be thinking about sacking unnecessary spell slots. For our 4th level spells, we get, of course, the 2 great choices, Polymorph and Dimension Door. You want them both. Level 8, we get our ASI, which puts our charisma at 20. No big shock there. And at level 8, we get our second 4th level slot, which is fantastic. And at level 9, we get our 5th level slots. So 3rd level is a big bump for casters. For wizards and sorcerers, 4th level is, or 7th level for 4th level spells is obviously another huge jump forward. And here with 5th level spells, you get things like your choice of things like animate objects, Big B's Hand, telekinesis. The wizard gets Wall of Force, which is, well, but you do get Wall of Stone. Now, it's no Wall of Force, but it can serve. So it's just a question of what you think is going to serve you best. You also, of course, get Synaptic Static, which from a damage spell is no great thing because it's doing the damage that Fireball does. But of course, it has the debuff. And the damage, of course, is Psychic, which is fantastic. So I highly recommend taking Scrying as a utility spell. Scrying is a fantastic spell. But that's a great suite of choices. You only have that one 5th level slot. So here at 9th level, and we're only going to 10th level. So, make sure it's something that you really want to use. It could very well be argued that scrying does something that you don't have access to otherwise. I know it would be very hard to not take a combat spell, but it is worth considering that it is allowing you to do something that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. But you need to subordinate utility for combat as a sorcerer. But it just depends on what your party composition is. So do you have a bard? Do you have a wizard? Because they can both get access to scrying. Then don't take it yourself. But if you don't have either of those and it's you, maybe you take it. But I understand if you want to take the combat spell, by all means, take the combat spell. And at 10th level, we get metamagic. So we get another 2 metamagic options and we get our second 5th level slot. So at this point, if you're looking at this kind of a character, how has it played for you? It's impossible for me to say. I think that to play a character like this, you have to love the idea that you're going to get hosed from time to time. You should almost look forward to it because you'll have done everything you can do if you went with human and got heroic inspiration to be able to leverage yourself against bad luck. And after that, it's just what the dice do. And you're going to have obviously glorious things you can do. And it's just because you can constantly prime that pump with Tides of Chaos and just contrive ways to always have a wild magic event happen. And when you combine that with the sheer raw power of bend luck, I mean, I love the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, the old version. I still like the new one, but I think Wild Magic is pretty tough to beat in terms of sheer fun, but it isn't going to be for everybody, obviously. All right, well, that's all I've got. If you enjoyed the video, please like, please share, please subscribe. And if you're stuck and you don't know where to go, you can always search for a secret door. Until next time, I cast Bless on all of you.